Backstitch is generally used as an outline stitch or to create straight lines. So in the case of our little fairy wren pattern, we are using backstitch to create the legs. And on this pattern and on most patterns, it will be indicated by a solid line. And just on the bottom, I've also noted that our backstitch is done in 3799. So you'll see all of our backstitch here is done on the diagonal. So you can basically do any direction with your backstitch. So I'm going to show you how to do backstitch in a horizontal line and then how to do backstitch on a diagonal. So we're just going to use this line here as our starting point. And what you'll notice that I'm not starting on that line. I'm actually starting one square in. And this is where the name backstitch comes from. So rather than stitching left to right, I'm actually going to be stitching right to left. So I'm going to be stitching back one square. Now when I come up, I'm not coming up here, but I'm coming up here. So I'm going back one square. So to show you that on my diagram here, what I am doing, this is kind of my starting point here. So I'm coming up at this square and then I'm stitching back that way. When I come forward, I'm coming forward 2 squares and stitching back 1 square. Next one, I'll be going forward 2 squares and stitching back 1 square. So a good thing to think about with backstitch is that you're stitching 1 square back and then you're skipping 2 squares forward. So we came in here and we're going 1, 2 squares forward. And look, quite honestly, if you don't get the exact technique, it doesn't really matter as long as you are creating a straight line. That's really the ultimate aim of the game, to create a straight line. So that's backstitch on a horizontal line, so you could equally do this on a vertical line. Now with our fairy wren legs, you'll notice that they are on the diagonal. So rather than doing this square by square, we'll be doing it rectangle by rectangle, so 2 squares together. And the reason for that is I don't want to go through, I want to try and keep going through, stitching through the holes. I don't really want to go through the white parts of the fabric because your straight line will look a little bit uneven then. So what I'm aiming for is there's a hole here, there's a hole here, there's a hole here. So that is why I'm going to be stitching kind of in a rectangle. So if I just show you that on my chart. So imagine this is the top of my leg here. Oh, sorry, we'll go up here. So we'll be stitching kind of rectangle, a long stitch that kind of straddles 2 rectangles, and then we'll be stitching the next rectangle. Again, another long stitch. And so to show you what that looks like on our fabric, I'm coming up in, this will be, if we're thinking about this leg, this is the top right hand corner, and we're going 1 square down into the bottom left hand corner, and that's kind of that's our little rectangle here. And you'll see I didn't go back. It doesn't really matter if you don't, if you start here and go here rather than going here to here, it doesn't matter. It's still going to create a straight line. But now I will go into my back stitch. So now I'm coming again. So to stitch the next section, I'm thinking about stitching as a rectangle, going from the top right to the bottom, or the bottom left to the top right. So bottom left, top right. I'll do one more like that, bottom left to top right in a rectangle. And then to stitch our little legs, our little feet here, I'm just going to again go across 2 squares rather than 1. So we've got a bit of a corner here. And then here we've got 2 on a diagonal, again kind of thinking about a rectangle. So with our first one here, so this is our first little rectangle, and here's our second little rectangle. So that's backstitch. So it doesn't need to be tricky, just think about what you're trying to achieve. What you're trying to achieve is a straight line.